Scoobtober? Scooby-Doo!
Hey, welcome back to Scoobtober on Scooby-Topia. For this month-long celebration, we're looking at more of the top scariest villains of Scooby-Doo that gave you nightmares. This is one I've had my eye on doing for a while now with how often she comes up, and I love giving attention to what might be the most underrated of the classic-era Scooby shows. Today we're looking at Season 1, Episode 10 of Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo. I left my neck in San Francisco, originally aired November 24th, 1979, to visit the terrifying Alcatraz Island on a trip to the Bay Area, and bite off more than we can chew with the Lady Vampire of the Bay. This mystery is so diabolical, one of our own even falls victim to being a suspect. The title, of course, is a reference to signature song of Tony Bennett, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, which is a pretty scary thing to do. But surely there's plenty more to be terrified of with how often this vampiric temptress gets asked for on the channel. With all that said, let's dig into what made the frightful Lady Vampire of the Bay stick forever with those unlucky enough to encounter her episode. We open up at the infamous former prison on an island, Alcatraz, which actually only closed down in 1963, 16 years before this episode aired, where the gang are there to take a tour. The boys get comfort that there are no prisoners currently, until one of the other tourists, Sally, does warn them of the Lady Vampire of the Bay. Mrs. Cornell, another tourist, chastises her for frightening Daphne, who says she's actually just feeling a bit woozy. The boys aren't keen to enter when hearing the ghosts of prisoners might still haunt their cells, and unfortunately staying outside doesn't help, as the Lady Vampire is there waiting for them, hissing as they run off. On the tour, we get exposition of Lefty Callahan on the way to their cell, being a criminal who was supposed to reside here after stealing the world's largest diamond, emerald, and ruby in one night, was sent somewhere else after the closure of Alcatraz, and the jewels were never found. Fred and Velma then realize Daphne is nowhere to be seen, just as the boys run in and hide in a cell. They tell them what they saw, and the vampire herself appears to confirm it, but she gets away before the others can catch her. So they have the guide, Jack, free the trio from the cell. Jack and Sally say they didn't see the vampire, but Mrs. Cornell says she went that way, so Scrappy runs off and brings back Daphne, who says she got lost. Shaggy jokes that maybe she's the vampire since they both have red hair, and they get back on the boat to leave when Velma notices one of the lights is weirdly out, the red glass lens being missing. Jack reminds them the rest of the tour is for Fisherman's Wharf tonight, but Mrs. Cornell says she has to pass for her opera plans, and Daphne likewise has to pass because she still feels ill. The boys are ready for food though. The gang carry on without their friend at the hotel, looking through old legends of San Francisco to find out more about the vampire. Finding her, the book confirms she has no reflection in a mirror like her Transylvanian cousins. The boys hearing enough and leaving when the lights go out, and in comes the Lady Vampire. She warns them not to meddle in her affairs, casting no reflection in the mirror behind her, easily stopping Scrappy and dashing out the window. Daphne comes out to see what the noise is about, and Shaggy realizes she casts no reflection just like the vampire. Jack says it's time for the rest of the tour, so they send Daphne back to rest, and the lights weirdly go out again. Velma finding the hotel very interesting. The boys arrive at the wharf, Scooby being frightened by a horn and landing in the arms of a wax vampire, so they head to a pizza place and ask for extra garlic to keep them safe with the bloodsuckers on the brain. They see a red-haired woman they think is Daphne walk by, so they follow her where she seems to be headed to Chinatown. They tap her shoulder to say she's headed the wrong way, but she turns and reveals herself to obviously be the vampire. She does again what everyone wants to do and simply locks little Scrappy in a box, and then runs away. Sorry Scrappy, I love you, but only after this season when Don Messick took over the voice instead. Velma takes a look at the mirror, and they find fresh paint the color of the wall. Yet that's dry, so what was it from? They suddenly hear people scream about seeing the Lady Vampire, running out to see her above, jumping down and running away where she vanishes. Fred notices she took the green eye from the statue, wondering why when it's only glass. But Velma connects it to the missing red glass lens on the boat's light earlier, now having a hunch that the vampire is after the infamous stolen jewels of Lefty Callahan. The vampire passes the boys again, so Scrappy chases her into a dead end, seemingly turning into a vampire bat and flying into one of the hotel windows. Scrappy enters Daphne's room to see if she can help, but they find the bat inside, seemingly confirming Shaggy's suspicion that she's the vampire. But when Fred and Velma show up and they check the room, they find Daphne peacefully asleep in bed. Fred and Velma are convinced the jewels were hidden in plain sight, and the vampire is retrieving them, so now they only have to find the diamond. Velma then notices the advertisement for the opera, which Mrs. Cornell said she's attending tonight, and Velma suspects we'll also see the vampire. When they check it out, the place is closed until tomorrow and empty though, so they head inside and split up. Right on cue, the boys run into the Lady Vampire, who jumps onto the chandelier and flies around, jumping back on the stage where Scrappy manages to actually trap her with his plan. But when he accidentally turns off the lights, she's vanished when they come back. Jack, Sally, Mrs. Cornell, and Daphne all come in to investigate the lights being on, where Velma accuses one of them to be the vampire, and also Lefty Callahan. Come back for the lost jewels. The ruby was in the boat light, the emerald was in the statue, and the diamond was in the chandelier. Velma already knows who it is though because of Mrs. Cornell's little fib about being here tonight, unmasking her to reveal the vampire. And with removing the makeup, out pops old Lefty. Kind of wonder if the title and her name being Lefty is also intentional. Jackie points out the lack of reflection in the mirror, and Velma explains that when she noticed the frames were different, there clearly were two mirrors, one of them being freshly painted so the vampire wouldn't reflect during the switch, explaining the paint they found. The bat flew into Daphne's room because it was the only open window with the lights off, and she probably left the room to get water when they checked inside. The boys apologize to their friend, and Velma of course finds the jewels inside the purse Mrs. Cornell had.
Scooby-Doo! And Scrappy-Dappy-Doo!
And that's the Lady Vampire of the Bay, in search of her lost jewels. While people needlessly rag on Scrappy, his debut season of the show in 1979 not only saved the franchise from cancellation, but it's also genuinely just a great season of the series. I saw this season in normal rotation on Boomerang as a kid, and it's still incredibly fond for me. I'll always include it in any rewatch of classic Scooby, and it's no surprise that the Lady Vampire herself has stuck with people as well, a sign that this season has a lot more value than some might consider, with plenty of solid episodes and villains. Her design isn't particularly standout necessarily, when there are so many amazing villain designs, but there's still something about her, and her hissing, that makes her so ominous. The setting of Alcatraz adding another unsettling backdrop the longer time goes by. And of course, the thought that our Daphne might even be behind this, actually a vampire, can be a scary thought. Who are your friends really if you never knew them? Overall, with as requested as she's been, it's clear this is one vampire that belongs amongst the ranks of Scooby-Doo's scariest villains. What about you? Were you scared by the Lady Vampire of the Bay, and why? On the opposite end, did she never actually scare you, instead feeling brave like Scrappy? Let me know. That's it for this video, and sadly that's also it for Scoobtober. If you're watching this on release day, happy Halloween! I hope you enjoyed this month-long limited event and returned to the channel while it lasted. I definitely put a lot of time and effort into making it possible, with many sleepless nights from August into September. It's sad to see it go. With that being said, I bid you adieu. That is to say, bye!